There's a question I keep coming back to, no matter how many times I think I've settled it. It started with a scene, the one in the woods, everyone on their knees in the dark. And I wasn't thinking about who the bat was going to find. I was thinking about what was actually happening, what kind of thing this was. Because violence, sure. But it was more than violence, it was a lesson. A carefully designed demonstration about the shape of the world, delivered at the end of a barbed wire bat in a forest clearing at night. And once I started thinking about it that way, I couldn't stop. Because this universe doesn't have one kind of power. It has 7, at least. And they move through the whole franchise like threads in the dark. Crossing, tangling, pulling against each other. Some of them feed on fear. Some feed on secrecy. One of them feeds on nothing you'd recognise as power at all. Tonight I want to trace all 7, not to rank them, not to hand you a verdict at the end, just to follow each thread and see where it leads, and notice what connects to what. There's time. The night is long. Let me start with something that might sound obvious, and then I want to complicate it. When most people think about power in The Walking Dead, they think about force, weapons, walls, the ability to make someone do something they don't want to do, usually because the alternative is dying. And that's not wrong. The franchise opens with a cop, a gun, and a world that still has just barely enough structure to make those things mean something. Rick Grimes rides into Atlanta on a horse, in uniform. That image is doing a lot of work. It's saying, here is a man whose power was granted by a functioning civilization, and he is carrying that grant forward into a world that may no longer recognize it. By the time he reaches Alexandria in Season 5, the uniform is long gone. He is wearing dirty jeans and carrying a machete, and the question of where authority comes from has gotten a lot harder to answer. Deanna Monroe, former US Congresswoman, architect of those walls and those elections. She reads him the moment he walks through the gate. She can see that he is something her old systems never prepared for. Not a criminal. Not a soldier exactly. Something that emerged from the space between. What is power when the institutions that used to grant it no longer exist? That question is alive in every corner of this universe. And what I find remarkable, genuinely remarkable, is that the franchise doesn't give one answer. It gives 7 distinct answers over 11 seasons and 6 spin-offs, and they don't cancel each other out. They layer, they bleed into each other, they corrupt each other in ways the characters don't always see coming. There's the raw physical kind, the kind Negan carries in a bat, and the governor carries in a fish tank full of severed heads. Spectacle and terror, designed to make resistance feel like a language nobody speaks anymore. It doesn't just hurt you, it performs itself, and the performance is the mechanism. The governor stages gladiator fights not because he needs the entertainment, but because making people watch violence teaches them to accept it. Negan doesn't need to be at Alexandria every day. He just needs Alexandria to hold the memory of one night in a clearing. There's the institutional kind. The CRM flying their helicopters over a continent that doesn't know they exist. The Commonwealth running a class system of 50,000 people, built on the premise that what you were before the world ended should determine what you get after it. Organisations that survive by making their rules feel like the only rules that can keep you alive. There's the charismatic kind, and this is where it gets interesting. Because charismatic power in this universe wears 2 very different faces. The Saviours tell you that you are Negan. They don't just take your obedience, they take your name. And the Whisperers take something deeper. They take your face. The masks aren't just disguise, they're a ceremony of erasure. Alpha doesn't ask you to follow her. She asks you to stop being you, and once you've done that, there is nowhere left to go. but toward her. Resource power is quieter and maybe more honest than the rest. Walls, fields, the particular authority of having food when other people are hungry. Alexandria runs on this. Hilltop runs on this. The kingdom and its carefully concealed pig farms and its theatrical king with his tiger. All of it is resource power dressed in ceremony. And further out, in Texas, Madison Clark builds something out of a baseball stadium that runs for over a year before the vultures take it apart. And further still, in the tunnels under Manhattan, a man figures out how to run an economy on the gas produced by decomposing bodies. That's resource power at its most distilled. You find what there is to find and you build a system around it. Moral power is the hardest to hold. It doesn't have walls or weapons. It's just a decision you make, repeatedly, about what you're willing to do and what you're not. And the authority that decision carries in the eyes of people who watch you make it. Rick lives inside this power for seasons. Morgan spends his entire arc trying to figure out whether it's possible to believe in something like, all life is precious, in a world that keeps proving it isn't. Information power. This is the one most viewers missed at first. The one that Jadis was running quietly in her junkyard while everyone was focused on the saviors. A helipad, a symbol on the wall, a number to call when she needed a helicopter in the dark. Information is power in this universe because almost nobody knows what's actually happening at the largest scale, and the person who does gets to decide what the world looks like. And then there's the last one, the quietest. The one that gets called weakness by almost everyone who doesn't have it and called everything by the people who do. The bonds between people. The loyalty that survives loss. The particular gravity of what we owe each other when everything else has collapsed. 7 kinds. All of them visible in this universe. All of them connected to each other in ways that take years of watching to fully see. Let me show you how they work. Picture this. Or don't, just remember it. You've already seen it. The trees are dark. The air in Georgia is close and warm even at night. And the forest presses in from every side. And there are RV headlights cutting across the dirt road, casting long yellow rectangles across the ground. There are people kneeling in a line. Rick, Maggie, Glenn, Daryl, Carl, Michonne, Rosita, Sasha, Aaron, Eugene, Abraham. People we have followed for 6 seasons. People whose worst moments we've witnessed and whose quiet moments we've shared. And they are on their knees in the mud with their hands behind their backs, and they can't look at each other. The saviors are everywhere. Dozens of them standing at the tree line with flashlights and guns. The mathematics of the situation are immediately, terrifyingly clear. There is no fighting out of this. Then Negan comes around the side of the RV. He is dressed well. Leather jacket, clean hair. He carries Lucille on one shoulder the way you'd carry a sports bag, completely at ease, like this is the most natural thing in the world. Nothing frantic about him. No adrenaline visible. No anger. He is comfortable. This is his version of a Tuesday. And the contrast between the people on their knees who are afraid and shaking, and the man standing above them who is neither. That contrast is the whole point. That's the first lesson he's teaching before he says a single word. He starts talking. He's done his homework. He knows about the satellite station, the outposts, the lineup of things Rick's group has already taken from him. He lays it out with the casualness of someone reading from a grocery list. And then he introduces the game. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. He sings it, slowly, the bat swinging in a lazy arc with each syllable, pointing at one kneeling figure and then the next, and the people on their knees are all making the same terrible calculation. Don't flinch. Don't give him a reason to pick you. Hold still. Hold still. And the whole thing is theatre. That's the word I keep reaching for. Theatre. Because the bat is real, and the deaths are real. But the game is not a game. It is a lesson delivered in the idiom of a nursery rhyme. Abraham goes first. The bat comes down and doesn't stop. He stays upright for a moment. That moment feels impossible in retrospect, that a human being could sustain what's being done to him and still remain upright. And he says what he says, and the bat comes down again. Then Daryl does the thing that is so completely Daryl, it almost defies comment. He swings. He punches Negan in the face. He cannot help it. He will never be able to help it. It is the most human thing anyone does in this whole sequence, and also the most catastrophic. Negan pivots. Glenn goes next. Glenn's last words are for Maggie. One eye is wrong. His face is already wrong. He turns toward where he last saw her, and he says her name. And the bat comes down again. What Negan has just done is not merely killed two people. He has installed a specific kind of power inside the minds of everyone present, and everyone who hears about this night afterward. He has shown them what happens when someone resists and what happens when someone doesn't resist, and neither outcome is survival on the original terms. The calculus has changed. The old math, fight back, defend yourself, protect your people, no longer computes. Watch Rick in this sequence. Watch specifically what happens in his hands. There is a moment after Glenn falls when you can see him trying to move, some animal decision beginning in his spine. And then it doesn't happen. He goes still, not because he gives up, because he understands in one terrible second the complete architecture of what he has walked into, the scale of the Saviour's reach, the number of people at the tree line, the specific precision of Negan's control over this situation. Rick makes a calculation. The calculation takes approximately 1 second, and the result of it is that his hands go to his sides, and he stays on his knees. That stillness is what Negan actually wanted. Not the deaths, though the deaths served their purpose. The stillness. The moment when the most dangerous man in the room decides not to move. The first level of power, the physical kind, the spectacular kind, works by making people make that calculation, over and over, until the calculation becomes reflex. The fire shifts, a log settles with a soft creak. The world outside the wall is very quiet tonight. The good kind of quiet. The kind that means nothing is moving out there. Here's something I think a lot of people missed, at least on first watch. Maybe second watch too. Jadis, the woman in the junkyard, the scavengers. Season 7, Episode 10, New Best Friends. She appears leading this peculiar community living in a trash heap. Shredded jeans, asymmetrical haircut, that clipped speech pattern that sounds like English learned from a textbook. The whole thing reads as another of the franchise's strange post-apocalyptic communities. Interesting, quirky, good for a few episodes. She has a helipad on the roof of the junkyard. Nobody really asks about this at the time. The show doesn't want you to ask yet, but go back and look. A properly constructed helipad. The kind you build because you are expecting regular helicopter traffic, not the kind you inherit. It's there in Season 7. And if you know what to look for, the 3 interlocking circles symbol is there too. The same symbol that appears on CRM uniforms, on their helicopters, on canned goods from the Civic Republic. In a junkyard in Season 7. She has been in contact with the CRM since before we meet her. In Season 8, Episode 14, she tries to trade Negan to a helicopter that arrives at night. The pilot won't take him. He's not what they need, he doesn't fit the classification. But the exchange itself tells you everything. Jadis has a number to call. She has a protocol. She has been conducting business with an entity whose existence the rest of the franchise doesn't even know about yet. What she has been trading is people. The A/B classification gets laid out explicitly in Season 9, Episode 3. An A is a test subject, someone strong and capable, ideally a leader, someone the CRM can use to study the reanimation process, which means biting them and observing them through death. An asset whose value is entirely in what their dying can tell the researchers. AB is a useful human resource, someone who can be placed into service, inducted, put to work inside the CRM's machinery. And Jadis saved Rick Grimes by calling him a B. Think about what that means. Rick, who built the AHK Alliance from nothing, who took down Terminus, who made the call at the bridge, Rick is held up to the CRM's classification system by this one woman, and she says, useful asset, not test subject. She makes a choice, in one moment, that determines whether he dies on an operating table or disappears into 6 years of captivity and eventually finds his way back. And she makes it for reasons that have nothing to do with CRM protocol and everything to do with the particular texture of her feelings for him in that moment on that bridge. One woman's quiet decision. That is the entire hinge on which Rick Grimes' survival turns. Here's one way to read what Jadis understood, earlier than almost anyone in this universe. The most durable power is not the power to hurt people. It is the power to know things that other people don't. She found a helipad, and a symbol, and a set of protocols, and she figured out what they meant before anyone around her was even thinking about it. And she spent seasons building a position within that information structure that let her act on it undetected. She was not powerful in the way Negan was powerful. She was powerful in the way a person is powerful when they know what's in a room before they open the door. Her arc inside the CRM is worth following all the way through. By World Beyond, she has risen to warrant officer. She lets Lieutenant Colonel Kublek take the fall for the failed Portland operation. She plays institutional politics the way someone plays chess, who learn the game by watching other people lose. And in The Ones Who Live, she is the secondary antagonist, the human obstacle between Rick and Michonne and the door out. Before Rick bites her, and she has one last choice to make about who she is, she makes it. She asks him to do what needs doing. That's not a defeat. That might be the most honest thing she does in the entire franchise. Jadis is the only character who functions as an antagonist across 3 separate Walking Dead shows. And in every single one of them, her power is entirely informational. She doesn't carry a bat. She carries a knowledge of what the bat means, and who made it, and what it costs, and how to position herself in relation to it. Rick Grimes is the most honest portrait of ideological power this franchise has ever attempted, and I think we sometimes miss how much it cost him to hold it. Start at the beginning. He wakes up in a hospital bed with no IV, no nurse, no sound except a long, terrible stillness. He finds his family gone. He finds a world that ended while he was sedated. And his first instinct, before he even understands what has happened, before he knows whether Laurie and Carl are dead or alive, his first instinct is to find someone who needs help and offer it. Morgan and Dwayne, hiding in his neighbour's house, surviving in the dark. Rick's response to encountering them is to organise, to plan, to present himself as someone with authority and a direction. He was a deputy sheriff. His entire identity was structured around being the person who shows up. But the law he was trained to enforce no longer exists. The society that gave him the right to carry a badge and a gun, that society has dissolved, and the gap between who he was built to be and what the world now requires of him is where Rick Grimes lives for the entire run of the show. He keeps trying to build structures, the prison council, the governance of Alexandria. He cannot stop himself from reaching for the frame, even when the frame keeps breaking. The Rick-tatorship moment, Season 2, end of Better Angels, when he stands in the barn and says, "This isn't a democracy anymore." That's not Rick becoming a tyrant. That's Rick having a crisis about what authority even means without a system to back it, and answering the crisis the only way he knows how, which is to make himself the system. Temporarily, provisionally. He never stops believing there should be something else. He just can't find it yet. And then Carl dies. Season 8, Episode 9. Carl has been bitten. He has one night. He spends it writing letters. A detail that keeps moving me every time I think about it. This boy sitting down in the middle of the apocalypse to write letters, because he believes enough in the future to want to communicate with it. He tells Rick what he wants. He names it. Mercy, building, the possibility of peace. Even with people who are enemies, he names Negan specifically. He says, "Do it for me." Picture Rick's face in that scene. He is listening to his son tell him what kind of man to be, and the instruction runs directly against everything the last 2 seasons have carved into him. He has been at war. He's been running on righteous anger and the specific cold logic of survival and the conviction that some people simply have to die. Carl is asking him to step out of that logic. Carl is asking him to believe something harder. He says yes. My mercy prevails over my wrath. He speaks the line in Season 8, Episode 1, before Carl is even dead. It arrives as almost a premonition before he has been tested by it. And then the test comes in Season 8's finale. He cuts Negan's throat with a piece of broken glass, fast, no hesitation, and then in the same breath orders Siddiq to save him, the mercy and the violence in a single gesture. He does not become a pacifist, he becomes something harder to describe, a man who can commit violence and then choose something different anyway. Not because the violence was wrong, but because the choice after it matters more. Maggie screams at him. She is not wrong to scream. The tension between mercy and justice is not resolved in that moment. It becomes the question that the franchise carries forward for seasons. The Ones Who Live takes Rick to the end of that arc. He has spent 6 years inside the CRM, captive, conscripted, coerced by the logic of his hand and what it would cost to lose it again. He hears the echelon briefing. He takes it seriously. He understands Beale's argument. He even understands why it might be right. He is not naive about the stakes. And then he picks up the ceremonial sword and uses it. That choice is not the same as Season 2 Rick deciding there is no democracy. It is the opposite. It is a man who has sat inside a system that believes it is the only rational response to catastrophe, who has genuinely weighed the argument, who has decided that survival purchased through atrocity is a different name for extinction. He kills Beale with the sword that Beale used as a symbol of his authority. The sword that gives life is the sword that kills, Beale said. And Rick took him at his word. The low hum of the fire, a moth finding its way toward the light and then thinking better of it. Somewhere out there, a long way off, water moving over stone. There is a moment in Season 1, Episode 6, TS19, that I want to sit with before I tell you what it connects to. The CDC is almost out of power. Edwin Jenner has spent months alone in this building, running experiments, watching his colleagues turn, watching the lights go out one by one across the whole facility. He is the last scientist, He's going to die when the building purges itself in a few hours. And he has decided that's acceptable. And he has been alone so long that acceptable has started to feel like peace. Then Rick's group arrives, and he gives them the building, and he feeds them, and he gets drunk with them. And for one night, the CDC feels almost like the world before, and then he takes Rick aside and he whispers something in his ear. We don't find out what he says until season 5, but you can see Rick absorb it in real time. Watch the way his face changes, the particular quality of the stillness that comes over him. He doesn't ask Jenna to repeat it. He doesn't look surprised. He looks like someone confirming something he already suspected and had been hoping was wrong. Later in the episode, Jenna mentions, almost as an aside, the kind of thing you say when you're trying to give context to a larger point, that the French were the last to hold out, that their research teams were making progress on the regenerative mechanism before their power failed. He says it the way you'd say that a promising student dropped out of a program. A small sad note in the larger catastrophe. It is not a small note. Go to the very end of World Beyond. Season 2, Episode 10. The post-credits scene. A French research facility. The graffiti on the wall reads, Les morts sont nés ici. The dead were born here. A scientist from a team called Violet is downloading files, and she plays a video of Jenna, our Jenna, the same face, the same man, discussing what he calls variant cohorts, walkers that are faster, stronger, moving differently than the ones we know. He notes they've been reported in Europe, not in the United States. He says this with the tone of a scientist, noting an interesting anomaly he intends to follow up on. Then a man comes through the door with a gun. He says, "You started this, all the teams. Then you made it worse." He shoots her. She reanimates in under 2 minutes. She is strong enough to dent a metal door. Wait, hold that for a second. Because what just happened in that scene, and what it connects to, is one of the most significant pieces of mythology in the entire franchise. Jenna knew about European variants in Season 1. He had data from the French teams. He knew they had been making progress on the regenerative mechanism, which means he knew they were deep enough into the research to be producing results. The World Beyond scene's implication, the thing the man with the gun is accusing the Violet team of, the thing he means when he says, "You made it worse," is that the research produced variant walkers, that the attempt to understand or cure the reanimation mechanism altered it, created something faster and more dangerous than what came before. Here's one way to read the whole chain. If the French research teams were working on the reanimation mechanism early, working on it hard enough to produce variant cohorts by year 1, then the outbreak may have originated in or been dramatically shaped by scientific intervention. Not maliciously, not as a conspiracy, just as the ordinary consequence of researchers pushing against a problem they didn't fully understand, without the oversight that would normally slow them down. And those variants show up in Daryl's France. Jeanette's pouvoir des vivants weaponise them. Burner zombies, heat-seeking, faster than anything we've seen in the main show. The Primrose team's research, the same family of experiments that the Violet team was running, produced something that a former cleaning woman with nationalist ambitions can deploy against her enemies. Go back now to that clearing in Season 7. Everyone on their knees. What put them there in the most proximate sense? Negan, the saviours, the logic of violent power. But underneath that, the collapse of civilization. And underneath that, a crisis that spread so fast and so completely that no institution could contain it. And underneath that, possibly, not certainly, but possibly, a laboratory where someone tried to do the right thing and made everything worse. The most dangerous power in this universe is not the bat. It is the mistake you make when you believe you understand something you don't. Jenna stayed in that building voluntarily. He had the most complete picture of what had happened of anyone we meet in this franchise. And he decided the best thing he could do was run out the clock. Whether that was despair or something that looked like wisdom from the inside. I think about that sometimes. What he knew. What he chose to do with it. The CDC cafeteria. The wine. The music. Everyone laughing for one night. And him with his quiet knowledge. The dead were born somewhere. He knew that better than anyone. Let me trace something that I don't think most people have noticed as a single continuous thing. Because it plays out over years and across multiple shows and never announces itself. The act of kneeling. Physical submission. One person or group of people brought to the ground by a power that has decided the moment has arrived for a demonstration. Negan is our clearest example, and the woods in Season 7 are our anchor moment. But go back before that. The governor's power operates on the same logic, dressed in different clothes. He doesn't make people kneel in the dirt. He runs Woodbury with the appearance of legitimacy. He has a title, a council, a facade of order. But the fish tank room, revealed in Season 3, Episode 3, Walk With Me. The severed walker heads floating in illuminated aquariums. The governor sitting in front of them, in the dark like someone watching television. That room is his version of the clearing. It is where his real philosophy lives. He keeps those heads because he likes looking at them. Power for the governor is the freedom to let your worst self be comfortable. The gladiator fights come later, Season 3, Episode 5. Chained walkers, an arena, the crowd cheering. This is not entertainment. This is civic education. He is teaching Woodbury what the world is. Violent, hierarchical, amusing if you are on the right side of the fence, and he is doing it with their participation, which is more important than their compliance. If they cheer, they are complicit. If they are complicit, they have submitted to something deeper than fear. The Whisperers take submission to its furthest point. Stand in the forest and watch them move. The masks are animal skins, walker skins, worn over human faces. Alpha does not ask you to be afraid of her. She asks you to stop being human. The kneeling she demands is metaphysical. You kneel by putting on the face of the dead, by agreeing that civilization was the illusion and the herd is the truth, by accepting that your individual identity was always a lie and the pack is the only honest thing. Beta never removes his mask. Even when he is killed, he dies inside another face. That is the furthest reach of charismatic submission. Someone so completely given over to the ideology that there is nothing left beneath it. Now look at the Commonwealth Season 11. No masks, no bats, no arenas. Sebastian Milton doesn't need spectacle because he has something better. He has structure that people mistake for fairness. The Commonwealth assigns you a job based on your pre-apocalypse occupation. 50,000 people, ordered, fed, protected, and the ordering so normalised that people don't experience it as a form of kneeling. They experience it as civilization. The lottery for housing and benefits is rigged, as Connie eventually exposes. Sebastian sends people with debt into walker-infested zones to retrieve cash for him. He does this because the system permits it, because the system is built to permit it. Because Governor Pamela Milton built a community where the estates stay separate and the working class stays grateful, and the mechanisms of that arrangement stay invisible. That invisibility is institutional power's great innovation. You don't need people to kneel on the ground. You need them not to notice they're already kneeling. France offers a different version. Genets pouvoir des vivants, stages gladiator fights, recognisably the same entertainment as civic education that the governor ran in Woodbury. Different continent, same logic. She calls herself the founder of the Sixth Republic. He called himself the governor. Different titles, same mechanism. I will create a spectacle that makes the strong survive principle feel like justice, and once you've applauded it, you've accepted it. And then there is the CRM, which does something the other power systems never quite achieve. The CRM's submission is total and invisible. The Civic Republic's 200,000 civilians go about their lives. Shops, currency, schools, the texture of pre-apocalypse normalcy. While the military wing destroys entire communities in their name, using their resources, without their knowledge or consent. Campus Colony is massacred before World. Beyond Season 1 even finishes its first episode, Omaha, 100,000 people, is killed with chlorine gas, and the population inside the Civic Republic is told it was Walker herds. Everyone in the Civic Republic is kneeling. In the deepest sense, they are complicit in atrocities they don't know are happening. Now go back to the woods one more time. Everyone on their knees in the dark. I told you earlier to watch Rick's hands. How they go still when he makes the calculation. But there's a layer to that stillness I didn't mention. Rick is not just physically outgunned in that moment. He is informationally outgunned. He does not know the full reach of the Saviours. He does not know how many outposts there are, how deeply they have already threaded themselves into the surrounding communities, what the actual size of Negan's operation is. He is on his knees not just in his body, but in his understanding. That is the template. Every power structure in this universe operates on some combination of physical and epistemic submission. Getting your body on the ground and getting your mind on the ground, and ideally doing the second one so thoroughly that the first one becomes unnecessary. The question every survivor faces is how to stand back up when you don't have the information you need to know what standing up even costs. Here is something I want to sit with honestly, because I think the franchise earns the honesty. What if Beale was right? Not about Omaha, not about the chlorine gas, not about the research subjects who were forcibly bitten and studied through death, not about the plan to eliminate Portland and install a military dictatorship in the Civic Republic, not about the methods, about the math. The Echelon briefing in The Ones Who Live, Season 1, Episode 6, is one of the most uncomfortable pieces of dialogue in this entire franchise, and its discomfort comes from coherence. Beale does not rant, he does not posture. He sits in his room with his sword and his ideology, and he lays out an argument. 14 years. That is the timeline he gives. 14 years before the mathematical pressure of herds, disease, resource depletion, and interpersonal conflicts produces an extinction event for the human species. He was running these models in year 2 of the apocalypse. Year 2, when most people were still just trying to find food and not die. He co-founded Project Votus with Lieutenant Colonel Kublek in year 2. He had already made the calculation. He was already building an institution while everybody else was building barricades. The CRM destroys communities, he explains, for resources and strategic superiority, and to ensure the city's secrecy. These are not admissions of guilt. He says them with the flat effect of someone explaining a budgeting decision. And underneath them is an argument. If humanity is going to survive, it needs one concentrated node of survival that is protected at any cost. And the cost includes other communities that are, in the long run, statistical liabilities. There's a version of this where the math is actually correct, and Beale is arguing from accurate premises toward a catastrophically wrong conclusion. That is the version I find most interesting, and I think it might be the one the show intends. Here's what I mean. Take the premise seriously. Humanity has a narrow window. The window requires concentrated effort. The concentrated effort requires sacrifice. That much might be true. The error is not in the premise. The error is in who gets to decide what the sacrifice is and who is excluded from that decision. Beale has made a unilateral determination about the value of 100,000 people in Omaha, and he has made it without their knowledge, and he's made it in service of 200,000 people in Philadelphia, who also don't know what was done on their behalf. The blade that gives life is the blade that kills, he says. He is describing a real thing. Survival does require hard choices. It always has. But hard choices made in secret, made by one man whose ideology has convinced him that the math removes the need for consent. Those are not the hard choices the universe endorses. Think about Eastman in that cabin in season 6. A forensic psychiatrist, a man who had everything taken from him by a patient he tried to help, a man who found that patient after the world ended and starved him to death over 47 days in a cell he built in his own home. He got his revenge. It was exactly as complete and satisfying as he planned, and it tasted like nothing. So he built something small instead. A cabin, a goat named Tabitha, a practice, Aikido, built on the principle of redirecting rather than destroying. A philosophy, all life is precious, not as an abstraction, as a daily discipline against the pull of the other thing. Eastman's philosophy was not born from innocence. It was born from someone who had tried the Beale model, the model where you calculate the math and then act on it, and found that it left him emptier than the loss did. Morgan carries this forward and keeps losing it and finding it again across 2 shows and 8 seasons, because the franchise knows that this kind of power is not a switch you flip. It is a practice you maintain, imperfectly, under conditions designed to make it impossible. What the franchise ultimately argues, not triumphantly, not simply but honestly, is that every power structure built on domination contains an internal contradiction that eventually exposes itself. Beale's structure consumed the communities it was supposedly protecting. The governor consumed his own people the moment they refused to follow him into the next assault on the prison. Negan's structure required constant escalation, because the memory of any single demonstration fades and the next one has to be bigger. Alpha's structure required that Beta believe absolutely, and Beta's absolute belief was a different kind of blindness. The math Beale ran might have been right. The answer it produced was not an answer. It was a slower version of the same extinction, administered from above rather than from the outside. The fire has burned to coals, still warm, just enough light to see by. The dark beyond the walls is complete and settled, the kind of dark that means the night has gotten comfortable with itself. Let me come back to Maggie. Maggie Rhee standing behind a fence at the Alexandria safe zone in season 7, watching through chain link, pregnant while the group that murdered her husband is on the other side. She does not say anything in that scene. She doesn't have to. Everything she is and everything she's going to become is already in her face. The stillness of someone who is not moving past grief so much as learning to carry it differently, learning to find in it something that has a specific weight and can be used as a tool or a compass. What Glenn's death installed in her is not rage, though there's rage. It is a particular clarity about what power looks like when it treats people as props in a demonstration. She has seen the exact shape of that wrongness, the performance of it, the theatrical sadism, the careful construction of maximum impact. She knows it from the inside, and she spends the rest of her arc refusing to become it. The Hilltop arc is the most honest governance story in the franchise. She doesn't take over from Gregory through force. She takes over by being present and competent and willing to absorb cost on behalf of people who are not her people yet. Gregory is weak and cowardly and ultimately treacherous, and she knows all of this earlier than anyone else does. But she waits. She waits until she has the trust of the community, and then she acts from that trust. When she hangs Gregory in Season 9 publicly, after his assassination attempt, that is an act of violence in service of community stability, not personal vengeance. The difference matters. She is not performing power. She is exercising it in the specific service of the people she is committed to protect. Dead City is where this arc reaches its strangest and most honest conclusion. By Season 2, Episode 8, Maggie stabs Negan. She has earned this. We have been waiting for this for longer than we can track. And then she pulls back. She doesn't kill him. It would be easy and completely understandable, and the show doesn't judge her for wanting it. It honours the weight of it. But he makes a different choice. Not forgiveness. I don't think the show is claiming forgiveness, and it would ring false if it did. She makes a choice about what the next chapter of her life is going to require. And killing Negan would close something without opening anything new. Their partnership is forged not through reconciliation but through shared loss. Ginny's death in Season 2. The way grief finds common ground even between the worst enemies. There's a version of this arc where community power requires that you forgo the most satisfying acts of violence available to you. Not because you're soft, but because you've understood that building is harder than breaking, and that you have already spent too much time breaking. Carol's arc runs parallel to Maggie's and is equally honest. From abused wife in Season 1, Ed's power, his control, his fists, to the woman who blows up a propane tank and walks alone into Terminus in Season 5, Episode 1, while Rick's group is still locked in a shipping container waiting for the end, single-handed. Completely without hesitation. She has mapped the compound, identified the choke points, located the most catastrophic thing available to her, and she has acted before anyone told her to. Every act of violence in Carol's arc is relational. It is always in service of someone specific. Terminus for the group. Alpha's death, orchestrated quietly, over months, through a bond with Negan that nobody else understood was forming. For Henry, for Daryl, for herself, France, in Daryl Dixon Season 2, for the person she loves most in the world, who has ended up on the wrong side of a continent. Daryl's power is the same species, non-hierarchical, earned through presence rather than title. He spends years after Rick's disappearance walking the river, looking for a body. The body is never there, he keeps looking anyway. This is the least strategically rational behaviour in the franchise, and also the most human. And people follow him because of it. Not because he is strong, he has always been strong, because he is that loyal. Here's one way to read the franchise's final argument. The seventh kind of power is the only one that doesn't contain an internal contradiction that destroys it. Every other power type we've traced tonight asks something of people that eventually exceeds what they're willing to give. Violence requires constant escalation. Institutions require secrets that get heavier with every community they bury. Cults require the absolute and continuous surrender of self, which is a commitment that erodes. Resources run out or get contested. Even moral power, wielded as an ideology rather than a daily practice, can become its own form of tyranny. But the bond between Carol and Daryl stretched across 2 continents over 11 years of television. That doesn't require anything except the willingness to show up. It persists through everything. Here is where it all starts to come together. Quietly. Trace the CRM from beginning to end. The three-circle symbol appears in Jadis's junkyard in Season 7, and we do not know what it is yet. It surfaces in Fear the Walking Dead Season 5, Episode 5, when Althea encounters a CRM soldier named Isabel in the field and has to be let go and made to forget what she saw. It is fully revealed in World Beyond, where we learn about the alliance of the three, the massacre of Omaha, the research facility in Ithaca running Project Votus, the A and B classifications, the 15 years of institutional architecture that Beale and Kublek built out of nothing in Year 2 of the Apocalypse. And it ends in The Ones Who Live, 2024, when Rick and Michonne rig the chlorine gas arsenal and detonate it in the facility where the entire assembled frontliner force is preparing to launch the Portland operation. 2 people end it. 2 people who were separated for 6 years, who found each other again through a chain of coincidences and choices, and the particular stubbornness of people who are not willing to let the other one go. That is worth sitting with. The largest institutional power structure in the post-apocalyptic world. The one with helicopters and chlorine gas and a 200,000-person city and a classified ideology, is dismantled by 2 people who love each other. Not because love is more powerful than chlorine gas in any direct physical sense, because the CRM's power depended on the secrecy that Jadis's information brokering maintained, and secrets have a weight limit, and Rick and Michonne together could reach the thing that needed to be reached. Go back to the woods. One more time, everyone on their knees. What grew out of that night? Maggie leads Hilltop. The most functional democracy in the franchise runs for years, and it runs because of what she decided that night about what she was going to do with what she'd lost. Daryl spends a decade being the most loyal person in any room he enters, and eventually a community in France asks him to protect something they have decided is worth protecting. And he does it because that is who he became after that night in the woods. Negan, who swung the bat, who designed the whole theatre of it, ends up in a different version of himself by Dead City Season 2, protecting people, making hard choices that cost him personally, trying to be something his Season 7 self would not have recognised. The night in the woods did not produce only what Negan intended. Rick killed Beale with the ceremonial sword and went home. That is the resolution, not a climax. The quiet word I keep reaching for. He had spent 6 years inside an institution that believed it was the only rational response to catastrophe, and he emerged from it having genuinely weighed the argument, having absorbed the echelon briefing in full, and decided that the kind of survival Beale was offering is not survival at its best. It is management of extinction by a different name. He came home. That was the act. Morgan says it plainly at his lowest point on Fear the Walking Dead. I lose people and then I lose myself. He is identifying the specific failure mode of the moral power holder, the person who tries to live by an ethical framework in a world designed to break it. He loses himself repeatedly. He comes back repeatedly. And coming back, each time from a different kind of damage, is what the practice actually is. All life is precious is not a conclusion. It is a commitment you make every morning against the evidence. Every power structure we have traced tonight has an internal contradiction. Violence escalates until it either wins everything or is stopped. Or institutions depend on secrets that grow heavier with everybody buried. Charismatic cults require the continuous presence and authority of the charismatic figure. Janae dies in France, and her movement splinters within episodes. Resources get contested. The stadium burns. The methane tunnels draw federations with armies. Even information power, Jadis's power, the power of knowing what others don't, reaches a limit when the information gets out. What does not have that internal contradiction is the bond between people who choose each other in conditions designed to make the choice impossible. It doesn't scale the way the other 6 do. You cannot field an army with it. You cannot run a city on it. Not directly, but it persists. It outlasts every empire. It outlasts the bat and the pikes and the chlorine gas and the classified briefings. It is still there when the fire burns down to coals. The picture that comes into focus is simpler than the question deserved. 7 levels, and only one of them doesn't eventually eat itself alive. We started tonight with a question. What is power really when everything that used to grant it is gone? I've been sitting with it for hours now, and the answer I keep arriving at is not the one I expected. Power doesn't disappear when civilization collapses. It finds new containers. A bat with a name. A wall around 50,000 people. A 3-circle symbol on a helicopter. A helipad in a junkyard that nobody was supposed to notice. A pike at the edge of a forest. A classified briefing in a room where the sword on the wall is not decorative. Every container fails eventually. Every one. The only thing that outlasts the containers is the thing that doesn't look like power from the outside. The woman who walks into a burning building alone. Not because she was ordered to, but because the people inside are hers. The man who puts a knife away from a throat he has every right to cut. 2 people who find each other again after 6 years and choose to burn down an empire rather than live inside it. Not nothing. Everything maybe. The fire is almost out. The dark beyond the walls is the soft kind. The kind that means the night has decided to be generous with us. Whatever question brought you here tonight doesn't need an answer right now. Let it rest, let it drift. Sleep is close, the question will wait.